Chapter 11, June 30th, Chicago, Illinois. The Honorable William D. Pleasance, Chief Justice of the Illinois Supreme Court, after perusing at length the menu at Oakley's, the only restaurant at which he would dine, and perhaps the finest establishment the city of Chicago had to offer, inevitably settled on the porterhouse steak, his favorite, and, no surprise to the waitstaff, the entree he never failed to order. Medium rare, please. Once the waiter had left the table, he sat back in his chair and took in the room, or rather allowed the room to notice him. Oakley's occupied the top floor of the Pennington, the third tallest building in the world. It surpassed the Willis Tower in height by nearly 20 stories. Directly across from him, a younger couple raised their glasses in celebration of something or other. A much larger party, making far too much noise, sat behind him. Nearly all of the tables were full, which was not unusual. His was positioned next to a window, affording him a panoramic view of the city below. He reached for his own glass, a Cabernet Sauvignon. Pleasance was a large man, his girth occasionally the subject of ridicule. It hardly fazed him, though. He did as he pleased, and eating was the one thing, above all else, that brought him pleasure. He fancied himself an epicure, often comparing his love of food to his love of the law. He lifted the Cabernet to his lips, savoring the left bank Bordeaux. It had been quite a day. The trial of Marcus Coble was finally coming to an end after nearly an entire year. Coble was one of over 100 wealthy philanthropists from around the world whose various foundations supported SEA, the Sustainable Earth Endeavor. SEA had formed decades earlier and was the organization largely responsible for erecting the seawalls along the Atlantic coastline. They were also the brain trust that had advocated for the pumping of seawater onto the Antarctic ice sheet. Fortunately, this radical and audacious engineering effort had been abandoned when the projections showed that, were such an undertaking even possible, it would only delay the inevitable. In recent years, the Coble Foundation had turned its attention to other environmental concerns, notably wildlife conservation. Coble's foundation was the primary recipient of charitable gifts to help prevent the further extinction of endangered species by combating such root causes as poaching and deforestation. To that end, they had been very successful, with Coble himself earning SEA's Distinguished Environmentalist of the Year award. But then, in a shocking turn that had changed the public perception of Marcus Coble from kindly benefactor to detestable thief overnight, an internal audit revealed that Coble had been embezzling from his own foundation for almost 2 years. The man was quickly brought to trial, only to see the process immediately slowed to a crawl by his formidable defense team. His attorneys intentionally stalled on the question at the forefront of everyone's minds. Where did the money go? In nearly every other case involving fraud, one could easily follow the money. Invariably, it showed up in things like European vacations or real estate or big-ticket items like private jets or yachts. With Marcus Coble, however, there was no such evidence. His defense was that he had simply reinvested the monies in ancillary charities, and by all accounts, the money seemed to have ended up in those very places. The Honorable William D. Pleasance knew otherwise. He knew there were a million different ways to hide money, move it around. He'd done it himself, quite recently, in fact. An anonymous gift had shown up unexpectedly in one of his offshore accounts several weeks ago. A most generous gift, 7 figures long. Hardly anonymous. Pleasance knew the score, knew what was at stake for Coble. It had become obvious to the judge that his fellows on the court, 3 of them anyway, had been bought. If convicted, the wealthy philanthropist was looking at going away for a long time. Conceivably, he might even waste away behind bars. An unfortunate end, to be sure. Still, the man was a criminal, and Pleasance knew that his decision was the critical one. Such a dilemma, he thought. He took pity on the man who, arguably, had done so much good. Coble had a family, attended church every Sunday. But Justice Pleasance could not abide such misdeeds. No, a message had to be sent. A message that this type of behavior could not and would not be tolerated. Such was the law. Nevertheless, he would accept the monetary gift. After all, How could he possibly give it back, not knowing where it came from? His dinner arrived, the porterhouse, served with braised radishes, shallots, and bacon. "Thank you," the judge said to the waiter. "This looks magnificent." He placed his napkin across his ample lap, then tasted the Cabernet once again. The loud, obnoxious party behind him was on their way out the door. He carefully picked up his fork and steak knife, like a surgeon carefully choosing his instruments. Then, with the greatest of care, he carved a piece of meat from the bone and placed it in his mouth. It was topped with caramelized onions and rosemary. He savored it, chewing slowly before finally swallowing. He picked up his napkin and dabbed the corners of his mouth. The meat was exceptional, beyond compare. Another sip of the Cabernet. He was holding the glass, already contemplating what he might order for his dessert, when the first shock of pain came. Sharp and hot to his stomach, the Cabernet sloshed over the rim of the glass and spilled down his front, staining his shirt. He dropped the wine glass, clutching the area where he had felt the stabbing sensation. Already there was a wet warmth there. The pain came again, sharp and sudden, this time to his chest. His body jerked to the right. While the judge had never been stabbed before, there was little doubt in his mind. Yes, in a detached sort of way, he was certain of it. He was being stabbed at this very moment.